Almighty God, we pray for your blessing upon this council, help and prosper its work for the advancement and benefit of its people, so that peace and happiness, unity and justice may be established among us all. Amen.
Amen.
Manningham Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we now know as Manningham. We pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present and value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I welcome all members of the public here tonight to this council meeting who have come along to observe proceedings. I would like to advise those present that tonight's meeting is being audio and video recorded. All care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the gallery, it is assumed your consent is given in the event that your voice or image is broadcast. The camera for the broadcast is just on the lectern up there. All council meetings are governed by a meeting procedure local law. I will introduce each item of business as listed on the agenda by calling it by number and reading the title. I will then call for a mover and seconder of a motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments and supplementary motions. I would like to draw your attention to item 7 on tonight's agenda, which is the public question time. This provides people with an opportunity to ask questions of the council. Questions must be registered prior to the commencement of the meeting to be asked. If we do not have the information at hand to provide a meaningful response, the question may be taken on notice and a response provided after the meeting in writing. I would also stress that I will only deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions in writing to council through the normal channels. Item 2, apologies and requests for leave of absence. There are no apologies. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. There are no prior notifications of conflict of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare one? That being the case, I'll move on to item 4, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Galbally.
I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on 10th of December 2019 be confirmed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. There being no debate, I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That is carried. Item 5, presentations. 5.1, the passing of Robert Douglas White. Councillors, it is with deep sadness that I must inform you of the recent passing of a former Mayor and Councillor, Robert Douglas White. Mr White served as a councillor for the Shire and then City of Doncaster and Templestowe from 1966 to 1980, including 1 term as Mayor in 1973 to 1974. Could I have a mover for the motion of condolence? Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council place on record its sadness and regret at the recent passing of Mr Robert Douglas White and record its appreciation for the contribution by Mr White during his term as Mayor and Councillor for the Shire and City of Doncaster and Templestowe, and to extend its sympathy and condolences to Mr White's family at this very difficult time.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Piccinini. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Item 5.2, the recent passing of a notable citizen, Alan Fotheringham. Councillors, it is with deep sadness that I must also inform you of the recent passing of Alan Fotheringham. Most of us know Alan, in fact I'm sure all of us do. He was a long-standing member of the Manningham's Audit and Risk Committee for 9 years between 2010 and 2019, including the role of chairperson from 2013-2017. Alan brought considerable public value to the citizens of Manningham during his time on the committee. and it's with regret that we note his passing. Do I have a mover for the motion of condolence? Councillor Haynes.
I'd like to move that Council place on record its sadness and regret at the recent passing of Mr Alan Fotheringham, record its appreciation for the contribution of Mr Fotheringham during his term as committee member for the Audit and Risk Committee, and extend its sympathy and condolences to Mr Fotheringham's family at this very difficult time, and mine also, as I was there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. Do any councillors wish to speak? On that note, I will put them...
You want us to share about it, please? Yeah, would like to share.
Councillor Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's time that I do stand and talk about the work that Alan has done on our Audit Committee, and being chairman of our Audit Committee as well for a couple of years. And recently I was at a meeting, wasn't that recent, it was probably 5 months ago, at a meeting where he actually declined to take on the, at the time we didn't know, the chairman, at the time we had not a clue that he did have an illness or whatever, but he did come to Manningham as on our Audit Committee as a representative from the community, and his insight and work was really valuable for council's operations, and for everybody for a long period of time. And he also brought an element of knowledge in financial and auditing affairs, and was quite sharp and would read through absolutely everything that we printed off and gave to him, and would be putting those notes there. And so for the work that he has done on behalf of the people of Manningham to represent them, I think it's a fantastic effort that he has done, and he will be sadly missed and hard to replace on our Audit Committee.
I can only agree with you, Councillor Goff. I spent some 5 years on the Audit Committee with Alan. He was a great mentor and support and encouragement to us as a council and our councillors in our role on that committee. And he had a significant value at every meeting he attended. His exhaustive preparation and contribution was highly valued right through the committee. So he's a sore loss to the committee and is a sore loss to our community. He will be greatly missed.
Yeah.
I'll put the motion, councillors. Those for. That is carried. Item 5.3, Australia Day Honours List. I would like to acknowledge the following Manningham residents who are recipients of awards in the 2020 Australia Day Honours List. Professor Roy Robbins-Brown is an Officer AO in the General Division for distinguished service to medical education and research in the field of microbiology and immunology and professional groups, I should say. Ms Melissa Noonan is a Member AM in the General Division for significant service to people with disability. Mr Vianney Shiel, Member AM in the General Division for significant service to electronic engineering and to education. Ms Judith Samet, Medal OAM in the General Division for service to community health. Mr Alfred Tregear, Medal OAM in the General Division for service to Australian rules football. We congratulate all of those people who have been given that recognition, and greatly appreciate their contribution to not only our city but to our state and our country. I'll now move on to item 6, petitions. There are no petitions. Item 7, public question time. So we have received a number of questions tonight, both in terms of early submissions and some submissions here this evening. So for the early submissions, the first questioner we have this evening is Mr Barry Watson. Mr Watson, would you like to come forward to the microphone, please? So, Mr Watson, as you are aware, I'm sure, you've been through this before, There are 2 minutes to make a brief introductory statement before asking your questions. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 3 months ago, I had a meeting with our CEO and former Mayor about NEL, North East Link air quality, prior to the Minister's NEL approval. I pointed out we needed to engage an air quality expert. This was ignored by the CEO. I was advised by our CEO that the 4 councils are united and air quality was not being ignored by Manningham. Councillors from the other 3 councils advised there is no united group. The Manningham NEL fails to even mention air quality health. Air quality health has been ignored by Manningham. A proper EES set AQ study has not been done for NEL. This was acknowledged by Dr Cowan, who was engaged by the other 3 councils. At the panel hearing, Dr Cowan recommended a proper SEP study. Table 108 in Mr Wynn's EES approval shows PM 2.5 is already exceeding SEP limits and excludes secondary particles. The numbers shown are averaged, exceedances for 365 days, but do not show serious peak alert events. Real AQ data is that NELP have in possession is being denied access to the community. EPA are refusing to activate the SEP intervention level, which should now be in place on the NEL route. At the last 2009 council meeting, Councillor Haynes asked Council about legal action in relation to the negative air quality and noise impacts. The response was, wait and see what the Minister's release says. Time now to act. Will the Manningham Council now take legal action against NEL based on the serious negative air quality health impact? Question 2. In the Minister's NEL EES approval for road traffic noise, he recommends upper level of residents are excluded from noise protection. This is in breach of the WHO 2009 road noise nighttime scoping requirements for the project. NEL nighttime noise limit has been set at 55, which is 10 dBA above the scoping requirement 45 dBA. 158 residents will be exposed to greater than 63 dBA, which is the 18 hours daytime, to save the NEL project money and prevent overshadowing. I believe overshadowing can be prevented with Perspex panels, and save money to compromise health is not an option. At property treatment, which may be offered, should not be an acceptable compromise on best practice. Will Manningham Council now take legal action against NEL based on the serious negative road noise, daytime and nighttime health impact?
Thank you, Mr Watson, for your question. From the outset, in the end, this particular project is authorised by the government and the state government under their legislation for major projects, and that legislation lays down a particular process that they've followed. So our council has made extensive submissions to the panel process on these and many other issues.
Not on air quality.
I'm happy to clarify. Thank you, Mayor. I'm certainly happy to clarify that.
It's pollution, particle pollution.
I'm happy to clarify if you give me a moment, Mr Watson. Thanks for the question. So you're quite right, we did meet 6 months ago.
3.
No, it was 6 months ago. It was in August.
Okay.
August. So we did meet in August, and at that particular time you were focused on noise particularly, and you did raise the issue of air quality as well. So we took that information. We, as you know, put you in touch with our legal representatives as well, so that you could put your case to our legal representatives. And what I would suggest you do is you go back and read Council's joint submission with all 4 councils to the panel, particularly pages 159 to 164, where it specifically references air quality, and we reference the experts that were drawn from the other 3 councils, as well as those 3 councils utilising our experts in other fields such as social impacts and economic impacts, to put in a joint submission that specifically refers to air quality.
You're referring to Dr Cowan?
I am.
Yep.
So in the end, the panel process has completed. They've produced their report. The Minister has provided his response to their report, and it's now the project will proceed based on the Minister's response. We are not in a position to challenge the substance of the minister's recommendations. The only basis we have for legal action is to appeal the process. And we are, in conjunction with the 3 other councils, considering our options about further legal action about the process. We have a timeline that we have to make those decisions on. But the legislative arrangements for the project doesn't provide a mechanism for us to target specific issues and take legal action. There is no basis for that. Now, it's not necessarily what everybody wants, but that's just the realities of the legislative framework in which this project sits. So, thank you for your question. We appreciate your contribution. I'd like to now move on to another question. We have received a question from Mr. Vincent Tester. Mr. Tester, would you like to come forward to the microphone, please? So, as usual, Mr. Tester, you have 2 minutes to make a brief introductory statement before asking your question. Please proceed.
Thank you. Councillors, Mayor and Mr Day. To prevent injury and death, equipment is manufactured to comply with safety standards throughout Australia. In the Manningham Leader, Mr Harrison stated that the child seat was safe and not at risk of breaking. I contacted the manufacturer of the child seat, Cajun Rubber, and Mr Kevin Dorr from Cajun Rubber stated in an email to me that it does not in its present form comply to the standard. A copy of that email is enclosed. The work schedule that I received from Mr Harrison, enclosed in the same envelope, confirms that a quarterly inspection of the Boulevard Children Playground occurred on the 30th of October 2019. Photos taken on the 20th of November 2019, 20 days after that date, show that it was not compliant with the safety standards, proving without any doubt that the quality inspection had not been done properly. In fact, the child seat was not compliant for 9 months. Photographic evidence that I supplied in December Council meeting proved that. Manningham City Council can either accept that an error has been made and learn from this incident. My question. The photographic evidence spanning 9 months proved that the quarterly inspection had not been done properly. The evidence supplied is accurate and not rubbish, as stated by a council officer in the Leader newspaper. These unjustified comments have smeared my reputation, and therefore I am requesting that Manningham City Council publish a retraction, and an apology would be appropriate. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Tester. I'll refer this question to our Chief Executive Officer for a response.
Thank you for Mr Tester, and thank you for the additional information that no doubt Mr Harrison and the team will look at. In relation to your concerns around officer comments, the comments made by the officers, and I've read those comments, were entirely appropriate and professional. There was no personal comments related back to you made by the officers in relation to your queries. We were simply answering your legitimate right to raise some concerns around process and responding to a media query. There were no direct quotes in relation to yourself.
May I ask a second question, please?
I'm sorry.
No? Well, it was...
Would you like to continue, Mr CEO?
I would like to say that the implied comments by a number of people in the community, Manningham Council, in my opinion, and the community that I've spoken to, agree with my comments and disagree with yours.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Tester. You're entitled to your opinion. Thank you for your time this evening. We have also received a question from Ms Cynthia Pilley. Ms Pilley, would you please come forward to the microphone? Great. So as you've heard, you have 2 minutes to make a brief introductory statement asking your questions. I appreciate that this is yet 2 more questions on the North East Link, but it's a significant project and I'm certainly comfortable to allow further questions on this particular topic.
Thank you very much. Following my question to Council in December 19, I noted in your response that the Council is fighting hard against the impact of the North East Link on Manningham residents. So if the North East Link were to go ahead, is there a point at which the damaging health effects to residents will be considered unacceptable and untenable? And would you therefore call on Premier Andrews to abandon the North East Link and provide transport services that work for everyone?
And your second question?
It was pleasing to hear in the Council's response from last year that Council will host another community information forum in March this year, because none of us can respond to what you don't know about. Will presenters to the forum be decided only by recommendations from the North East Link Agency and ministers of the Andrews government, or will Council also invite a person with expertise on the health impacts of air traffic pollution, for example, Associate Professor Dr. Vicky Kotsarilis, AM, recognised for significant service to integrated medicine, to health practitioner standards and regulations, to medical education and to the environment, as well as having received many awards?
Great. Thank you for your questions. I'll refer these questions related to the North East Link project to the Director of City Planning and Community, Mr Karambas, to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Ms Pilley, thanks for your questions. In response to your first question, as you know, the Council has been quite active in advocating for changes to the reference design that touch on a number of sort of environmental and health impacts, including the reduction of the footprint of the project, regular air quality monitoring and better integrated public transport solutions. So they were key components of our submission. So the Minister, as you know, has considered now the IAC report and has made a decision that addresses a lot of these points. And our intention, address some of these points in proposed EPRs that are basically the conditions that any developer has to comply with, or the consortia have to comply with. So our intention is to continue to work constructively with the project to ensure that we continue to get the best possible outcomes for our local community. In response to your second question, the community information session is currently being planned, so we're in the process of doing that. The focus of that session is really about providing the community with an easy to understand summary of where we're at with that project. It is quite complex and a lot of people are confused about what the findings were of the IAC and the Minister's decision. In fact, we as Council aren't happy with some of the findings because they do remain unclear. So it's really to have a conversation with the community about where we're at. The session will be facilitated by Council officers. We do not intend to bring any external speakers or experts as you've suggested, because we've basically gone through that process. We've interrogated all the technical and expert advice through the IAC, and as pointed out by the Mayor earlier, we're not in a position now to challenge the merits of the Minister's decision. If anything, we can only challenge sort of the process and any point of law. So the purpose of that session, as I said, is really to provide an update to the community as to where we're at and what the next steps are by this council.
Thank you.
Can I respond in any way? All right, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we've had, those are the three questions we've had which were given to us with notice before the meeting. We've also now have three further questions coming from members of the public who have attended this evening. We haven't had additional notice of these questions, so hopefully we're able to address them, but if not, they'll be addressed in writing after the meeting. So, great. Ms Stella Yee, if you'd care to come to the microphone, please. Thank you, Ms Yee. Ms Yee, you have 2 minutes to make an introductory statement and ask your question.
Sure. Good evening, councillors, Mayor and Mr Day. My question is, well, I'll do the preamble first. Since the scandal broke regarding the rotting of sports grants by the then Minister of Sport, Bridget McKenzie, to favour marginal seats, I decided to have a look at the list of successful applicants for the community sports infrastructure grants. Here's what I found. Of the neighbouring local government areas, the city of Maroondah received 2 grants, one for 484,000 and another for 121,000. The city of Knox received 240,000. The city of Casey received 160,000. And the Nillumbik Shire Council received 340,000. Sadly, I didn't see the city of Manningham on the list. When I was a candidate for the last federal election, I was made aware of a number of sporting grounds which are in urgent needs of upgrades. I'd like to ask whether the city of Manningham applied for any grants to improve the sporting infrastructure in our city. If yes, which projects were submitted but didn't get funded? And if no, why not? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Mr CEO.
Thank you for the question. In relation to the last federal election, there were 4 projects that received, or 4 sports-related projects predominantly that received funding. One was Baronia Grove Reserve Floodlights, second was the Templestowe Leisure Centre, the third was Ryshek's Reserve Tom Kelly Athletics track, and also the Warrandyte Football Club lighting upgrade. I can't confirm for you, I'll have to take that on notice in terms of whether there was actually any grants specifically related to the program that you referred to that's in the headlights and the headlines at the moment. So we'll have to take that on notice as to whether we actually did apply for anything in that space and confirm whether any of those grants that we were awarded were a part of that program.
Okay. Can I ask a question or no? Because it's very clear on the list that was given out and under the Sports Australia website that the city of Manningham wasn't listed, and the projects that you mentioned that received funding were not listed as well. So the one that I'm looking at is called the CSI, the Community Sports Infrastructure, and all the cities that I have mentioned were listed with the amount, but City of Manningham was not listed with any amount next to it. Yep, thank you.
Mr CEO.
I'm happy to respond to that. As I said, they were grants that were announced during the election period, and we're pursuing those as it currently stands. In terms of the grant category that you're referring to, your question was whether we applied for anything and weren't successful, and I'll have to take that on notice. What I was outlining to you was in reference to your element around the need for grants and investment in our sports facilities, and they are 4 projects that were announced during that period of time. Clearly unrelated to that grant program, if it's not listed there, but nonetheless we will provide further clarity as to whether we did apply for anything in that category and were unsuccessful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Okay, we have another question from Mr. Jeff Cranston.
Yes, Jeff Cranston, President of Warrandyte Can. I should just say I commend Councillor Zafiropoulos' motion, which is in the agenda for tonight, the motion relating to urgent climate action. Now, last year was Australia's hottest year on record, and Australia has been burning up since last August, with parts of every state and territory having been devastated by terrible bushfires. And the events of the last few months especially have brought home to many of us, to very many of us, how vulnerable Australia is to the impacts of climate change, including this municipality. So my questions are, firstly, does the Council acknowledge that we are facing a climate emergency? And secondly, if so, is the Council willing to make a declaration of a climate emergency as part of the climate action motion?
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Cranston. We appreciate them. I think in terms of the two questions you've asked, you will have a good understanding of Council's position in about an hour's time when the motion before the Council is debated.
Or shorter.
And decided, because your questions go to the very substance of that motion. And I think until that motion's debated and resolved, I can't really answer those two questions, I'm afraid. I'd prefer to let the debate play out and see what Council's position is.
Yes.
But thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, and we have one further person wishing to ask a question, Ms. Charlotte Sterrett. Please come to the microphone. So, as discussed, you have 2 minutes to make a brief presentation before asking your questions.
Hi, thank you for hearing us tonight. I'm also a member of Warrandyte Climate Action Now, and who've been in this community for about 10 years working on the issue of climate change and the climate crisis that we face today. And my question is very similar to what Mr. Jeff Cranston said. But before I ask the question, I really want to press home the fact that there is no future for all of us if we do not address the climate crisis that we face. My day job, in fact, involves working with people in developing countries in places like Tuvalu and Kiribati and in Vietnam, people who are vulnerable and marginalised, who have been on the front line of climate change for many years. They really understand what the climate crisis is about. Australia has not until very recently with the bushfires. So I'd really like to implore you and ask you tonight to really think about the future and our collective future and the future of our children when thinking about the motion on climate action tonight. So my question to you is, do you acknowledge that climate change is a serious threat to our existence? And if so, what will you do as a councillor to ensure we reduce our risk as much as possible and quickly, ideally through a climate emergency declaration and a comprehensive plan to address it? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm afraid I'm in the same position. It would be premature for me to prejudge the decision of the Council this evening on the motions before it. So...
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. That is the last of our questions for this evening. So, we are now up to item 8, admission of urgent business. There are no matters of urgent business. Item 9, planning permit applications. There are no planning permit applications. Item 10, city planning and community. There are no city planning and community reports. Item 11, city services. There are no city services reports. Item 12, shared services. Item 12.1, 2019-20 mid-year budget review. We have a report before us. Do I have a mover?
Moved as on the paper, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I rise that councillors actually support this report and motion of the activities of council for the past 6 months and its financial situation. It's very good to report that we are in a fairly healthy situation with regard to our status, and I know that it's not essential, but the Auditor General does look into the status of viability of councils, and as a result we are showing that we are in the top category in all areas there on low risk and financial representation and responsibility. Notwithstanding that, there's another wonderful piece of news, is that, and it was us when we first got in, we were trying to say we wanted to be debt-free, and when any loans that we took out would be repaid before the end of our term, so that anyone coming into the future would not be burdened down with debt. And we're now debt-free in Manningham with the repayment of a loan in November. So that's a piece of wonderful news, that the viability of Manningham being in the black has been maintained, even when we do go through programs to borrow money for a number of reasons. Some of them are forced on us, Mr. Mayor, where superannuation and whatever comes in there, but some of them we've elected to do. And the one that was a wonderful one is the conversion of our lights from normal incandescent lights to LEDs, and funding it through borrowings, and there's a payoff over a period of time with less energy use over that time, which has been a wonderful scenario. So I just want to commend the report. Everything's pretty well laid out there as where we stand, but we're in a very good financial position, and I'd like to thank the office and everybody with all the work they've done to prepare this, and our great work into the future of any monies into the future, and we're not doing it exactly on this report, but what we're going to spend if we know that we can't spend money in this next section, on what other items we will be spending that money on. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Goff. Yeah, I would like to commend the report, and particularly actually thank Kevin Eyre for his good work. I don't know if Kevin's here tonight, but we appreciate the officer's work in maintaining a great budgetary position. And it's great that this is our, as a council, this is our 3rd year, and that we're in that strong state. And I think it's a reflection on our good management, if I say so myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other speakers against the motion? Any other speakers on the motion? I'll put the motion therefore. Those for? Against? That is carried. Item 13, Chief Executive Officer, 13.1, proposed road name change, part Henry Street to Bloom Street, Doncaster. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Councillor Chen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council has received a road naming proposal to rename part of Henry Street in Doncaster. And this is a small section of Henry Street, between Henry Street and Clancy's Lane, and is officially called Little Henry Street. And Council consulted with the public in accordance with the naming rules, and the name Bloom Street was put forward and as the preferred name, and was supported by the majority of the people who responded. So I ask Council's support the recommendation so that the officers can proceed with the renaming process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zafiropoulos. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Any other speakers to the motion at all? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That is carried. 13.2, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kleiner.
That the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haynes. Councillor Kleiner. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? This is carried. Item 13.3, Record of Assembly of Councillors. Do I have a mover? Councillor Piccinini.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chen. Do you wish to speak, Councillor? No. There being no speakers, I'll put the motion. Those for, against, that is carried. Item 14, Notices of Motion. Item 14.1, Notice of Motion by Councillor Mike Zafiropoulos, AM. That's Notice of Motion number 1, 2020. Do I have a mover? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I move that the motion be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Councillor Zafiropoulos, the floor is yours.
I have included most of the reasons for proposing this motion in the background to the motion which has been circulated. I believe that as councillors, we have a responsibility not only to address the local concerns of residents and core issues such as waste collection, planning and building permits, road maintenance, etc., but also broader issues such as the climate emergency we are facing. In the time allocated to me, I will not attempt to provide the full rationale as to why I believe we need to take urgent action both globally and locally. After all, the scientific evidence on this issue is overwhelming, and the consequences of inadequate or no action are catastrophic, not only for Manningham, but for the whole planet. The Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, to which Manningham is a member, in their recent vulnerability assessment for our region, stated, and I quote, "Local governments are on the front line in dealing with the impact of climate change, having a critical role to play in ensuring that particular local circumstances are adequately considered in the overall adaptation response and involving the local community directly in efforts to facilitate effective change. Further, they strongly position to inform state and Commonwealth governments about the on-the-ground needs of local and regional communities, to communicate directly with their communities and to respond appropriately in a timely manner to local changes. Warming of the climate system has been scientifically proven. The atmosphere and oceans have warmed, as it was pointed out by a couple of the representatives from Warrandyte Cairn. Last year's was the hottest year on record. The amount of snow and ice continues to diminish. Global sea levels have risen more than 20 centimetres, and the increase of greenhouse gases has been linked to these developments. Manningham is particularly vulnerable to climate events such as flooding, heat waves and bushfires, as we have witnessed in recent years. And it is imperative for this Council to be fully prepared with policies and programs to deal with those issues. Of course, the recent devastating fires in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland have highlighted the rapid climate changes we're experiencing as a nation. The worldwide acknowledged scientist, Professor Ross Garnott, in his latest book, which was launched at the end of the year, and I had the privilege to be present, said, "A failure to act in Australia, accompanied by similar paralysis in other countries, would see our grandchildren living with temperature increases of around 4 degrees Celsius this century, and more beyond." Unfortunately, the fog of Australian politics has prevented this climate emergency to be properly and fully understood for what it really is. Thankfully, as more and more scientists are advocating for urgent action worldwide, the issue now has greater political and community support, as indicated by a survey of the Australia Institute in January 2020, which inter alia found that most Australians agree that Australia is facing a climate emergency and should take emergency action. Treating this issue as vitally important with an impact on all council's programs and services is not inconsistent with what's happening on our local government sector. In Victoria, most councils have already acknowledged the climate emergency and have developed or are in the process of developing appropriate action plans. This is also the case globally. For instance, the European Parliament recently, on the 28th of November 2019, declared a climate emergency and resolved to take all the necessary action, including limiting global warming to 1.5 Celsius. I highly commend this motion for your unanimous approval. If approved, it will show leadership and courage to make complex decisions which have long-term implications. It will also be consistent with Council's recent acceptance to embrace innovation in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Zafiropoulos, for actually penning the motion. I support this motion. It really acknowledges the reality that we're in, and it sets out a number of actions that we can take as a council. And I believe that this is, as we've heard from some of the questioners earlier on, it is important to acknowledge and that we are in already, without climate change, Warrandyte is in one of the most at-risk areas in terms of population, terrain and fuel in the world. So it'd be ignorant of us to basically put our heads in the sand and not acknowledge that we can do more and that we will need to do more in the years to come. So as I said, I really appreciate that Councillor Zafiropoulos has put this together, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other speaker against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? Councillor.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I would actually like to put an amendment across to Councillor Zafiropoulos, and if you don't mind passing these around.
Thank you.
So while you're looking at that, basically I really support Councillor Zafiropoulos' motion, and it is increasingly more relevant in the last few weeks, where Australia has, in the space of just those few weeks, been devastated not only by fire burning in 6 states, the worst air quality ever recorded. We have had dust storms right across the country. Yes?
Sorry, Councillor. So there's a matter of process that needs to happen here. So you've proposed this particular amendment?
Amendment, yep. So what I'm doing is I'm asking Councillor Zafiropoulos to accept just 2 minor changes to his motion.
I do understand.
Which as stipulated in that notice that I've just
I do understand. So the first thing I have to do is actually address your request for this amendment.
And I need a
have
seconder.
that considered, and then once that process is complete,
then I can speak.
Then if you wish to speak to the motion, you'll be able to, but I've really got to first deal with the amendment.
Cool.
So, Councillor, to both Councillor Zafiropoulos and Councillor Conlon as the mover and seconder, this particular amendment to the motion's been put forward. As the mover and seconder, it's up to you whether you accept it. If you do, then that becomes the motion that we're in the middle of debating.
I accept it. Can I say a couple of words or just accept?
You just get to accept it, and if it becomes a substantive motion, you'll get to address it in your closing. Councillor?
I accept it, but for clarity, I think that perhaps the changes should be read to the public.
I'll do that in a sec. So if you're accepting it?
Yep.
So what this amendment is doing to the motion is that it's adding the two words of climate emergency to the motion in two places. So the motion will now read that Council, 1, acknowledges that we are in a state of serious climate and environmental change, and that this, 2 new words added, that this climate emergency requires urgent action by all levels of government, including local government. Clause 2 remains the same as in the papers. Clause 3 prepares as part of Manningham's 2020 Environment Report a comprehensive climate emergency response plan incorporating inter alia appropriate actions, budgetary implications, etc. So the rest of the motion remains the same. In 2 clauses, the phrase climate emergency has been added. I'm assuming that's clear to people in the chamber and any who are watching online. So, given that you have accepted that as an amendment to the motion, that becomes a substantive motion and the debate will just continue. So, at that point, Councillor, you are welcome to speak.
Continue? Great. Well, I won't start from the beginning. Thank you, Councillor Zafiropoulos, for accepting that amendment. Basically, I just really believe that it is an emergency climate experience that we need to address. And just by those 2 changes, I believe by us calling it an emergency response plan, it makes a big difference. So I'll take it back to what I was saying, where we had the worst air quality we've ever experienced. Dust storms, hail, floods, high temperatures have broken all records ever since records began. This is, so this all sort of directs us to the fact that this is past a serious event. So that is where I want to replace the word serious with emergency, because our whole country has been in this state of emergency. And whether we believe scientists or not, the scientists who for 40 years have been alerting leaders globally to the need of action to climate change, it is evident that the climate is changing and heating our planet at a faster pace than it ever has before. But I would also like to add that I'm proud to say that Manningham has been a council that has been proactive in responding to climate change, as Councillor Zafiropoulos has outlined in his body of motion. My reason behind the amendment is the word serious, when it's in this context, it really doesn't sort of explain the urgency and the proactive work that needs to be done. Because when we're calling something serious, we're really just saying that it's requiring careful consideration and it doesn't imply action to be followed. Whereas in the dictionary, when you look up emergency, and the definition of the emergency word is that it is an experienced, unexpected and often dangerous situation requiring urgent action. So I think that makes the difference, I think, of swapping from serious to emergency and including emergency in our resolution plan. So the additional word of emergency may seem trivial addition to this motion, but necessary to better equip Manningham Council officers and future council or councillors to address the question, what else can we do to reduce the effects of climate change for now and for our future residents? And I really hope that we pass this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any speakers against the motion?
I have a question.
Certainly, Councillor.
Okay, these climate emergency words, this is the first time I've had them brought to me, and the motion that we've had previously I support, and I'm looking forward to speaking about that. But I've got a question first. Has this gone to the Council's Emergency Management Committee with these words, because as an emergency at council, I know we had an emergency recently, and our has this motion gone to the Emergency Management Committee of council?
No, councillor.
Okay, so have we considered consequences to what this amendment would be, and through the police, the SES, fire authority, and also our council costs and processes, and before today?
Well, councillor, this is a new motion. This wording's new. It hasn't been considered by the officers as a council law notice of motion, so it hasn't been preemptively considered by the officers. No.
Okay, so therefore the actual motion itself in its current form with the climate emergency has consequences that I don't think...
Councillor, is this a question, or are you...
Good.
Mate,
okay.
Are you now wanting to speak against the motion?
I'm happy to speak against the motion as it is, but also for the other motion, and why you would get my support if this was not. So, councillors, for me, I just caution the fact that this action for the words climate emergency put a standard out there that doesn't trivialise, and it doesn't... serious is what I support, but I don't support the word climate emergency. It puts a level of fear
urgency,
and it puts a level of concern in that basically will put the organisation into a having to deal with it if this does get up, and then it will have to go to the Emergency Management Committee and other issues. I do support the fact that this council, since the 90s, has been on the front foot, and I want to thank the council for what it's been doing over the many years to do with reducing our risks, including what we've been doing at Aquarina, MC Squared, the solar on Mullam, and including with what councillor, the lighting, to just name a few. The question earlier was what each councillor is looking at doing to reduce the risk, and I thank the questions from the public. One of the things I've been doing around the last 8 years is to try and help reduce the waste, and we have a zero waste policy here, and we're even putting it through to the schools and things. We do a lot of education to try and do zero waste. As the delegate, there is a lot of waste going to landfill that creates lots of leachate, and over the last, this is my 8th year in this, that I'm very concerned over the environmental way we handle our rubbish, and one of the things I encourage, and I hope we as council are also encouraging, it's not about me because council is teaching through the school, buying recycled products and trying to do the circular economy and the livability of our city and the air quality. So I'm very grateful for the fact that we have been doing work since the early 90s when the Doncaster Hill strategy was put in place with recycled water and a few other things that we're doing. So I want to thank this council for some of what it's doing. Again, the air quality issue and the water issue, including with the North East Link, which is a big concern to me. I agree with us continuing to state our case and being on the front foot for that. Our work here at council started way before I became a councillor. I was watching it for 10 years, and I'm certain way before my 10 years, we've been on the front foot here in Manningham, and I'm glad that we've got a team that work to look after the climate here and are on the front foot with the livability of our city. Clearly, in Warrandyte, we have fire issues and things, but I do enjoy the drive through there and the fact that we do have a lot more open space and trees. Here in Doncaster, we deal with a lot more issues with the air quality and the issues that, what we sometimes see as overdevelopment, and that's what the state government puts in place. The state government puts these rules in place, and I'm glad that the council...
Wrap it up, please, councillor. Okay.
The council lobbies quite often, so I'm just grateful for what we do here at council, and I think that Councillor Zafiropoulos' original motion I support, and I would like the word serious but not the word emergency. It puts a level of fear in through the community.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Kleiner.
Thank you, Councillor Zafiropoulos, for your motion. Thank you, Councillor Galbally, for the amendment, of which I'm supportive of. Clarifying very simply, serious means careful consideration or application. Emergency is a word that it encourages action. Manningham City Council is already doing a lot of action in that space. To have a very simple word added, which is now globally known, and it's something that if we're going to do and bring forth a motion, let's do it properly in line with what the state, the federal government and countries around the world are starting to recognise. It's a strong word, but it encourages action, immediate action. And when you look at the motion, prepares as part of Manningham's 2020 Environment Report, a comprehensive climate emergency response plan. We already have plans in place. To make that added word emergency is meaning that there's action to it. Manningham is doing some great things. We don't ignore that, but in the space of today and what's happening in this world, you can't ignore, whether you're a believer or not, why climate change is happening. You just can't ignore it. The insurance companies aren't ignoring it anymore. Finance sector's not ignoring it anymore. Education, I mean, it just doesn't stop. People are no longer ignoring what is happening. And this is about action. And I like the word emergency because it brings about action. It's a very good motion. Our officers are doing a fabulous job, and perhaps, you know, we as a council, which it talks about this, it educates Manningham residents, it's point 4, about council's important obligation to respond to climate and environment changes. It's allowing our residents to be more informed, better informed, because there's many of us, like myself, we want to do more. The question is how. And collectively as a body of government, to make a stand that's very clear and lines up with many of the other governments that are taking this, I think is a very good thing. So I think it's a great word to be added, and it just strengthens what already we're doing as a city that I'm very proud of, and that I believe and I hope that we will continue to do and be at the forefront in many aspects.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other speakers against the motion? Any other speakers at all? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I want to speak that the emergency means that requires immediate action. Most emergencies require urgent intervention. But we cannot ignore other voices claiming that the term emergency may implicitly prioritize climate change over other important social issues, and emergency framing can disempower citizens because the problem seems too big, and they believe that providing practical opportunities for action is a better long-term approach. It sounds, but I just want to provide a balanced view. There are always at least two views. And there are also calls for green swan concept as climate change alternative to the term black swan. There's another view. But from a legal point of view, unless there is actually a written declaration that refers to an act, which I don't think there is one, it may remain purely symbolic, and I acknowledge its symbolic value. And Mr. Mayor, it's very important, I must to say that here today, that the community should be aware of Council's long-standing efforts in addressing climate change. We already have key climate and energy policies, Climate 2020 Action Plan, and Securing the Future Adaptation Plan to reduce emissions and encourage people to adapt to our changing environment. We already have more than 6,000 street lights replaced with LED street lights across the municipality. And that emissions reduction is equivalent to taking more than 300 cars off-road for an entire year. And we have food security plan to assist in creating a sustainable food system. And as an organization, Council has in-house programs to track and reduce its energy use and carbon emissions. For community, we have done a lot of things, and Council websites provide links to other ways to save energy at home and to reduce our impact on climate change. Only last year, Council joined a group of 39 councils, Victorian councils, to investigate the viability of a joint local government power purchase agreement. And there are many collaborations and partnerships between councils and stakeholders. But again, council cannot do it alone, and everyone has the responsibility to take action. So personally, I think emergency here in this motion, purely symbolic, and acknowledge council really take things seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion? So, councillors, I actually want to speak to this particular motion. So before I do so, I want to make the point to those in attendance at the meeting and those listening in that I'm speaking not as the mayor, and I'm not expressing the view of the council. I'm expressing my personal view as a councillor. I am entitled to speak in debates. It's a pretty rare thing for a mayor to do it, but I am entitled to contribute to a debate. So for those who are here, I'm speaking not as the mayor, I'm speaking as any other councillor has this evening. So, I actually support the amended motion quite directly. It's certainly, in my view, an important shift to the motion because it recognises the point that we do need a new plan to adapt to climate change in our city. Our previous plan is called Climate 2020. There's a reason for that. It's because it set out our climate goals up until 2020. We need a new plan. That plan is being crafted, and I think that an emergency response plan is where we need to be headed as a city. Professor Garneau told us that in 2008 that his report talked up in two time tranches, up until 2030 and beyond. And he said in his report that impacts over the next 2 decades can be considered locked in because of past and present greenhouse gas emissions. At that time, he was already telling us that the changes that we are seeing today were locked in. And what we're doing today in terms of pollution is affecting climate in the future of our families, the future of our children and our grandchildren in my case. The only thing we can do to temper the magnitude of these impacts, he said, is by our adaptation effort. And I believe we must do far more in terms of substantial adaptation. Now, I've got a few pretty pictures here for you folks, because you know I like facts and figures and pictures. So I have some graphs for the councillors to take a look at, to consider. I'm happy to provide a copy to the public. These are from sound organisations, Bureau of Meteorology, NASA, the Water Corporation in Perth. They're all government organisations. These aren't made up facts and figures. There is enough to have one for everyone, councillors, so feel free to grab one. The first one is the stream flow data in Perth. Blue section tells us average stream flow up until 1974 over 65 years, I think it is. 63 years. Average stream flow, 338 gigalitres into the water catchment. In the last decade, at the right-hand side of the graph, what is it? It's 51.4 in the last decade. In the last decade, their water inflows were 15%, less than 15% of what it was for the 63 years up to 1975. These graphs are telling us that Perth is in a water crisis, courtesy of climate change. How is that city going to survive? They have to adapt. And Professor Garneau told us this sort of thing would happen. He said in his review in 2008, stream flow has fallen significantly in the water catchment areas in the southern regions of Australia. It was predicted that this would occur, and it's because of falling rainfall. And if you have a look, you'll see the graphs on rainfall decline. This is the 2019 report from the Bureau of Meteorology. The dark red areas tell you the lowest on record rainfall. Very significant picture. Large tracts of Australia, lowest rainfall on record. The next graph. Temperature, highest on record, the dark orange areas. Significant issues, highest temperature on record. And this is the temperature in Australia. This is what's happened in the temperature in the last 10 years, councillors. The last graph, the mean temperature anomaly. What it says in the report, what this graph says is that of the 10 hottest years on record, all 7 years since 2013 are in the top 10. All 7 years in the top 10 in recorded history. That's since 1901, since we've been keeping data on this. That's a significant challenge for our city. It's a significant challenge for our country. And I believe we as a council need to become more involved and do as much as we can within the constraints that we have to help our community and our city. So, if there are no other speakers, I'll hand the motion back to the mover to respond. Are there any? Sorry, are there any other speakers?
I was just going to say there was a speaker against it. So.
Yes, there was a speaker against. I understand. Thank you.
Well, I must say how proud I feel that my colleagues have supported this motion and supported it with intensity and with the research that this important issue requires. I have seen some of those plans. I've read Ross Gunnard's thing, but I didn't want to expand here. However, I'm very pleased that some of you decided to do that. It's great. Look, the word climate emergency is quite appropriate for a number of reasons. One is that it might be symbolic, but it's more than that. It's not that the other motion would not result in action, but the emergency becomes relevant because of the neglect of 50 years. We've known in early days when the support for taking action was very limited that there was an issue. However, we didn't take action. And this is an issue that requires not just Manningham, not just Victoria or Australia, but the whole world to understand and take action. So it is a very complex issue. So it becomes an emergency because of the negligence in us taking early action. The other thing is that climate emergency is a term that last year was the most popular term, according to dictionaries. It was the most popular term in the world. So to be consistent with other organisations initiating such action, I think it is much better to use the climate emergency in the motion. I've used it all over my background and my statement, but I think it strengthens the motion if we include it there. The other thing is, emergency doesn't mean that we will drop everything else and start doing, only climate change things.
Thank you,
the
Councillor.
motion does ask for a proper report. Look, I'll finish here.
I can't. You need to finish there, I'm afraid, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's time. Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion. Those for? Those against?
Based on the fact that it's symbolic.
That is carried.
Well done.
Unanimously, I might add.
Only because it's symbolic. I am.
So, item 15, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 16, councillor question time. Councillors, do you wish to raise any questions?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I understand that the officers are currently preparing integrated environment strategy, which will be Council's new major policy addressing climate change on a local government level. What is the scope and progress of this strategy? What is the difference between the current strategies and the proposed integrated environment strategy? And will the strategy include sustainable transport, such as public transport? Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. We'll refer this to Mr Harrison, Director of City Services.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I think his scope has just changed a little bit. But in answer to the first two parts of the question, the environment strategy is intended to be an overarching strategy which will sit under the resilient environment theme and goals of the council plan. The strategy will integrate the 5 main environmental areas of climate, biodiversity, water, waste and community stewardship. And the carbon abatement plan, which by the way replaced the Climate 2020 Action Plan, and the Securing the Future Adaptation Plan are basically focused on climate mitigation and adaptation alone, so this will sit over the top of those. Just in terms of where they're at the moment, we finished the internal workshops. Well, we thought we'd finished the internal workshops. We're going to have to go back and revisit those. And the initial draft is currently being developed. So once that's developed, it would come to you guys for a briefing session. Once everyone's happy with it, it would go out to public consultation. But in light of this latest motion, we will have to go back as officers and do a bit of a review of where that is sitting at the moment. In terms of sustainable transport, the livable city strategy will actually cover sustainable transport. How the livable city strategy and this strategy will sit together is still a work in progress. Clearly, it's an issue that affects the environment, so it has to be considered. How those two documents relate to each other is something we'll have to work through.
Thank you, Mr Harrison. Thank you for your question, councillor. Are there any other questions from councillors? Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I rise to ask for a report from officers. We're glad we've got a motion on climate, because this is really not to do with climate, but it is to do with our adaptation to climate and our policies. And I'm wondering if we can get a report on our council policies and council practices that may affect the safety of the area of Manningham from bushfire. I put it down to just that bushfire and wildfire and burning, in that if we can get a comprehensive list of our policies and our actual work practices. So it mightn't be written down as a policy, but it's an actual work practice of our officers on council-owned land and also
managed.
Council-managed land and owned land, council-managed land and owned land, and also on privately owned land within Manningham. And it especially goes also to the planning scheme and to the planning officers and to what we actually expect in clearance of private properties, because there are a number of issues that are putting there with planning that limit our ability to reduce the load on private properties, allowing fallen trees and other things not to be taken out of properties. And also we're doing it on our own. I know we don't have control, and I'm not asking us to look at what happens in our state parks and state government-owned lands, but I do want to know what policies that we do have, and also going to the area of net gain, where we're trying to revegetate the area. Now, that's a very noble thing. However, I think whether we do or don't, I don't know whether we do, but do we have land that, if it is unadvisable for net gain to occur on that block of land, i.e. you're over-vegetating a small area with 5 times the amount of trees that have been taken out, if there is a possibility of do we have areas that we designate in Manningham for that offset to be made in our public land and other lands? And that's just a question that is secondary to the report of this. And once that report is done, that this can go as an emergency issue, because we're still not out of the fire season, an emergency issue to SBS and other people to look through what policies that we do have.
Okay, thank you, councillor. I'm sure that'll be come back to us at a strategic briefing session. Thank you for your question, councillor. Do we have any other questions, councillors?
It is a question, but a sort of. Can we possibly also add the state-owned reserves in what councillor?
You can, but I know that we can't. I just wanted to.
I know, but there must be something that council can do to prompt them to do something about.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, lobby the state.
Other questions, councillors? Councillor Haynes.
I was recently brought to the attention of me to do with some dead fuel load in Zerby's Reserve. And the users of that reserve, there has been many of them been asking, what are we doing about that fire? They're calling it a fire hazard. I've seen it. I'm not prepared to. I'm not a person that strategises over any of this, but the Zerby's Reserve area with the dead wood fuel load that's been fenced off, I've been told that is quite a fire hazard. So I'm looking forward to getting that as part of the report, but also to do with the state issue behind Weatherby Road, on the old Weatherby Road behind Brindy Crescent is a lot of trees that have caught on fire over the last few years with the lightning strikes, and the pine trees are still dead and not taken down, and there are other fuel loads down there also that are causing some
two specific fuel load sites, councillors. Do you want officers to inspect and respond to you on?
Yeah, and these aren't
to
do with, yeah, so one's to do with council, please. Can we have that inspected and responded to, please, the Zerby's Reserve? And the other one is the one that is the Weatherby Road on both sides. They are areas that the people around the community have been complaining about. There are also some people that take their dead wood down to that area. So they're two specific sites that are concerning to me and the people that have been conversing with me. And also, I've already said this to council officers at times recently with photos and things over some of our trees hitting wires, and some of the responses that the residents have put forward are that we've got a backlog on getting that work done, but I'm hoping that that's not true and that we can make this part of our, if it needs to be funded to help, I support getting these trees and wires and things, because they're some of the areas that I've been told about.
Councillor, could you please clarify what the question is there?
Okay, so that question was for a couple of streets that I've already mentioned to the officers, so I don't need to mention them again.
All three of these issues, I think we have
you.
a process for raising these issues. We all raise these issues on a day-to-day basis as councillors. I think it'd be great if you would just simply use those processes for simple requests like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Including this one.
So, councillors, are there any other questions from councillors? Great, thank you. Item 17, confidential reports. There is a confidential report which we can deal with in the meeting as it is now, based on the motion that is here. Do I have a move of this particular motion? Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council declare the report and attachment 1 contained in item 17.1, 110 to 114 Hall Road, Warrandyte South, no longer be confidential information. The report and attachment 1 be considered in the open meeting of Council.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Do you have anything to add to the motion, councillor? Do you wish to speak? No?
No.
Great, thank you. I'll put the motion, those for. Against, that is carried. So, item 17.1, 110 to 114 Hall Road, Warrandyte South. We do have copies of the paperwork available in the chamber if anybody in the public or other wish to see the details of that particular item. However, we have a motion before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Conlon.
I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Great. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Do you wish to speak to the motion, councillor?
No, thank you.
There being any speakers against the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion, those for. Against, that is carried. That being the last item of business, the meeting is closed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.